So, welcome. My name is Kyriakos Kourousis. I'm the chair of the Airworthiness and Maintenance Specialist Group of the Royal Aeronautical Society. In this talk today, we will be able to discuss and to have an insight understanding on what's happening on the maintenance, repair and overhaul industry in terms of the impact of the pandemic. Firstly, a few practical matters around this talk today. There will be a Q&A session at the end. So please submit your questions via the questions function on your control panel, and we'll be able to answer us and cover as many as possible. Everyone will be on mute, of course, and cameras off as you are already. If you need to contact us on a technical issue, please post in the chat box as well, and one of our organizers will attend to that. And as with any other of the talks, this is also recorded. So some words about the society. The Royal Aeronautical Society is the only global organization serving the entire aviation and aerospace community as both a learned society and a professional engineering institution. As such, the society is independent, evidence-based, and authoritative, relying on a body of knowledge going back more than 150 years. The society plays a leading role in influencing opinion on aviation aerospace matters through various means, including publications, social media profile, interactions with the government, and an extensive events program. Our airworthiness and maintenance specialist group is concerned with all aspects of airworthiness and maintenance, and subject matters include design, production, type certification, continuing airworthiness management and maintenance, and of their related components, and incorporates the personnel and organizations involved in such product and process development and operation. The group is led by a committee that provides inspiration and leadership strategies for the aerospace industry to consider. The committee assists the society with the development of the aerospace industry and its people. We organize events such as today's visits. We contribute articles to the aerospace magazine or government consultations, and we welcome volunteers to get involved in planning or writing for any of these activities. Now I would like to present our speaker for today, Mr. Mike Ainsworth, who is a very experienced professional from the aviation industry. He is now in his 48th year in the industry. He has started with Monarch Aircraft Engineering as an apprentice and progressed to being a multi-type rated Par 66 licensed engineer before becoming a manager. Mike has worked worldwide in commercial, cargo, business, and MRO environments at senior management level for over 30 years. He has held accountable manager and nominated post holder positions with a number of organizations, and he's currently Safety Compliance Director and Part 145 nominated post holder with STA's Aviation Services. Michael is an incorporated engineer and a fellow of the society. So I would like now to give the floor to Michael. So Mike, can you hear us?
Afternoon, Kyriakos FRAeS.
Excellent. So I'm going to stop sharing. So have stopped sharing my screen. You can now share your presentation.
How are we doing, Kyriakos? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so we are now sharing the screen, yes?
That's correct, yes. So you can perhaps put it on slides so for the full screen to appear.
Okay,
You have to reverse the view to in PowerPoint. There is a
I'm sorry, Kyriakos, can you help me out here?
yes, it's the next the icon on the left, I think. So if you click the icon on the left from where you were before, the one which shows the monitor. That one, yeah, I think yes.
It's
so
okay now?
No, I'm afraid not. So let me see if I can do something else here. So perhaps I can share that from my screen if that's okay with you, and you can. So if you, Mike, if you can minimize this screen on the top, perhaps, or okay. So I can share that from my side if that's okay, and I can change the slides.
No, if that's okay with you, Kyriakos, I'm happy to continue like that.
Okay, so let me share my screen then, and I can run it from here if that's okay with you. Okay, so Mike, can you see the first slide?
Yes, I can see the first slide.
Okay,
Kyriakos.
okay.
Thank
So
you
let
very
me know.
much.
I can change the slides. Okay.
Okay,
And
thank you. Just stand by
you could
1
use your
minute,
camera
please.
if you wish as well. So I'm going to turn off my camera. You can use it also if you wish. Otherwise,
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you again for offering the opportunity to talk about this very interesting topic.
Okay, are you on slide 1, Kyriakos?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, slide 1.
Okay, stand by 1 minute, please. Thank you. I do apologize to the audience for my just a couple of seconds and I'll be with you. Okay, slide 1, please, Kyriakos, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Kyriakos, could I ask you to do me a favor? Could we possibly defer the start for 5 minutes so you and I can make sure we've got all this in order? Would that be okay?
Yeah, so that's a live event. So
I think it would be better for the audience and for myself if we could just defer for 5 minutes and then we can get everything aligned to make sure we have full understanding and that we can make this work properly.
yes, if you would like to share your screen over from your side, that would be also acceptable. You know, if it is more convenient for you, I can stop sharing. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think we just call a halt here for 5, please, Kyriakos. Do you mind?
Yes, I'm not sure how we can do that. We have to leave the meeting then.
Okay.
So okay, who can take a break? So yeah.
Okay. Just 1 minute, and I'll get this working.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. There we go. I think we're online now. Yes, we're good to go.
Yes. Okay. We can see you.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. Okay. My apologies once more, and I'll be with you in 2 seconds.
No problem. No problem.
Thank you.
We can share it from your screen if you wish. It's up to you. Whatever. I can stop sharing and we can share it from your own screen if that's easier. But just make sure that you use the presentation mode, not the speaker mode appearing on the screen. Otherwise, I can run the slides from here, and you can indicate. I can change the slide.
Yes, I'm just looking at opening one more document, and I'll be fine. Okay, Kyriakos, thank you very much. If we could just proceed then, I think we're good to go. And if I could ask you, just make sure, yeah, if you could, I'll ask you to change the slide where, as and when, okay?
Excellent, yes.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody. And thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss the MRO in the new normal. My intention this afternoon is not to underpin or undermine any other efforts that are being made at the moment. I realize there's a lot going on in the industry. These are my observations. And just to advise you that I don't actually represent any organization. These are my thoughts this afternoon. Kyriakos, next slide, please. Okay, the subject I'll be covering this afternoon is the MRO in the new normal. But before I do that, we'll be looking at the MRO prior to COVID, during COVID, and what we're looking at afterwards. I've actually been working on this presentation for quite some time. Kyriakos asked me when I joined the group last year for various members of the group to present. And I was somewhat reluctant to do so initially because I was new to the group. And also I wanted to see how other presentations were. I haven't started off particularly well this one, I do apologize. And also I wanted to observe the 2021 summer season and indeed MRO and airline operations. I also took time to obtain inputs from sources within the industry relating to the subject being discussed. Thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Kyriakos. Thank you. Well, why me? Go back to the slide 2 or 3. Previous slide, please. Previous slide, please, Kyriakos, number 3.
It's in slide 3. There is some slide delay, perhaps.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, why me? As I said, having a few months to ponder this presentation, I'd like you to humor a person whose first recollection in aviation was standing behind his father on the flight deck of a TCA Super Constellation. That's the picture on the left-hand side. And somewhere over Canada, and then watching him operate the flight engineers panel. I did subsequently the same on the Britannia that's in the middle. And some people on the talk this afternoon may remember an airline called Transglobe Airways based at Gatwick. And then eventually to Monaco on the 720 on the right-hand side. And I thought, well, I actually quite like the idea of aviation. So here we are today. But next slide, please. And it wasn't only my father. As you can see from the list there, the pedigree from the family regarding aviation is quite extensive. My grandfather, both my grandparents, my father and 2 of my uncles were involved with aviation. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Kyriakos.
We're in slide 5.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Okay. Over the past 49 years, well, where have I been? What have I done? Where have I worked? Who have I worked with? I won't go through the full list there, but it gives you an indication as to the locations that I've worked and also the companies I've worked with. It's a broad brush. It's included cargo, it's included schedule, it's included charter, and in business as well. And at this particular moment in time, Kyriakos, I've actually moved on from STS. I'm now working for a startup airline called North Atlantic UK, and I'm based in Gatwick. So that's where I am at this particular moment in time. Next slide, please. So what have I done? What have I let myself in for? Well, over the past few months in preparing this presentation, it's become very obvious that this is a very large subject. And as such, the focus on this presentation will be on the UK MRO industry, with reference to the bigger picture when required. And the bigger picture, I mean the industry and the outside the UK. COVID-19 continues to be a major influence in our industry and will remain so for several years yet. It's a contributory factor, but not the only factor to a bigger picture. This has become obvious during my preparation for this presentation this afternoon. I'm constantly thinking about the presentation of the last 9 months, rewriting it several times, talking with numerous industry contacts, observing the industry, reading subject matter, and being directly involved with an MRO at a director level until recently, now being with a startup airline, has assisted by being at the sharp end. Again, apologies if I offend anyone during this presentation. Please be assured, if I do so, it is totally unintentional. Thank you, Kyriakos. Next slide, please. As I mentioned at the start of my presentation, if we go back to, sorry, we've moved on, move back. We're looking for slide 7, please, Kyriakos. Can we move on, please? Okay, the presentation we're looking to cover my observations on the UK MRO industry. And the presentation will be in 5 sections discussing the MRO industry. That's pre-COVID-19, UK Part 66 license holder demographics, and during COVID-19, post-COVID-19, and indeed what does the future hold. Next slide, please. The focus will be on Boeing and Airbus, MRO supporting medium and plus size aircraft, UK Part 66 license holder demographics, factors affecting the UK MRO, and airlines and operators with an impact on the UK MRO. Next slide, please. Areas discussed in this presentation will include safety, culture, cost, revenue, profit, external influences, training, mentoring, workforce age, succession planning, the regulatory authority, market trends, technology, and the environment. As I have mentioned before, this is a vast subject, and I am just giving an overview this afternoon. There is a significant amount of in-depth investigation required to go further into the subjects that I've raised, and I'm sure that has already been done. Next slide, please. Okay, pre-COVID, the old normal that I've called it. Thank you. Next slide. Pre-COVID, the old normal, the writing for the industry was already on the wall. I'll explain to that later on. COVID-19 was, in many cases, the straw that actually broke the camel's back. After 2 737 MAX losses, the type was grounded in March 2019, re-cleared to operate by the FAA November 2020, EASA and Transport Canada 2021. And as of September 2021, there were 575 orders of the type, but 516 cancellations. And China cleared the aircraft to operate in 2021, of December 2021. Several airlines retained in-house 145 capability, but in many cases outsourced heavy maintenance due to the high cost for such activities. Cheaper labor costs offshore attracted some operators who had mixed experiences, quality, and return to service timelines. Next slide, please. Continuing with the pre-COVID, the old normal, the reduced availability of skilled workers due to the number of apprenticeship schemes being cancelled, apprenticeships timescales being reduced, and the reduction in the source of traditional industry suppliers, large airlines, aircraft manufacturers, the armed forces, etc. In some cases, apprenticeships had been reduced to 2 years and trained to Cat A level only. Management and quality experience was lacking in some cases. I shall broaden that statement by saying that in many cases in the MRO industry, people were promoted because they were good engineers, not because they became good managers. Relatively low staff turnover. Indeed, a Gatwick operation, a line operation at Gatwick, they currently have staff in their 70s. They had ongoing issues with the 787 engines. The level playing field in the industry at home and abroad was questioned. The competence level of some Part 66 holders from UK and overseas was questionable. And the OEM were moving into after-sales markets, which impacted negatively on the independent MRO. The MRO acquisitions, mergers consolidated the marketplace, and if there were any cracks in the industry or the operation, they were made more apparent. Next slide, please. The UK MRO Limited was higher cost to the customer while not always producing the quality product we delivered on time that the UK MRO Limited had built its reputation on. An aging workforce was not being replaced with sufficient numbers, and in some cases, not of a sufficient standard. There was a misconception among some industry experts that the numbers of staff to support MRO worldwide were of sufficient number and quality. Indeed, I have sat on panels around the world at certain events where people have actually sat there and said there are sufficient numbers, and I would question the numbers and I would also question the quality. I'll give you an example where I was working for a Middle East airline, and we noticed that we were getting 100% pass rates on our examinations when people were applying for positions within the organization. It then transpired that our examination sheets were indeed being advertised on websites and people were buying them. There are also people stood outside the examination rooms passing the answers to the questions through open windows. We changed the numbers of the questions around and the answers around in examination papers, and in following instances we had 100% failure rates. We then had issues with competency when the competency assessments were underway, where we found that people that had been employed that actually held licenses could not do simple maintenance tasks such as wire lock, split pin, torque load, fastener installation and removal, and basic troubleshooting, even though the documentation was available. And in some cases, the command of the English language, which is we all know is used in the documentation and aircraft maintenance manuals, a number of them could not read or write English to the required level. So we looked at competency levels being developed, which was long overdue. SMS was being introduced. The regulatory authorities were delegating self-regulation to Part 145 organizations. FligScam, I'm sorry if I've got that word wrong. It's called flight shame. An antisocial movement was antisocial flying social movement was gaining momentum with But with 95% of all flights cancelled as a result of COVID, momentum was lost. Next slide, please, Kyriakos. Apologies for the time scale, the time lag here. I then looked at the demographics for the Part 66 license holders, and may I say thank you very much to the UK CAA. They have been very supportive of this next slide and this presentation. We went back to 2007, and again, one more, apologies as well for the small text. However, 2007, I started the figures and the compilation of data through 2021. The first column is BCAR licenses. The next one is Part 66, and also the third column is both. For a simplistic view of this slide, the green is an increase on the previous year. The red is a decrease on the previous year, and an amber is retaining the same. And as you can see, the issue regarding the number of license holders and the age demographics really started to take effect in about 2017. If you look in the left-hand column, those are the age ranges, 21 to 30, and then it's 10-year gaps through to 71 to 97. And yes, there are license holders that are current with a CEA in that age range. Next slide, please, Kyriakos. To make it easier, I've actually presented this slide with the numbers of Part 66 license engineers. Alongside on the right-hand side, there is again the age band. So you can see through the various age ranges whether there's been an increase or reduction over the years 2007 through 2021. And the slides all look to have a downward trend on all age ranges, apart from the bottom one, which is age range 71 to 98. That's the only age range where there's been an increase constantly over the last 3 years. Next slide, please, Kyriakos. Current aircraft UK CEA Part 66 licenses as at November 2021. There were 11,300 people holding UK CEA maintenance licenses, 8,600 in the UK, 2,700 overseas. And that 11,300 people hold a total of 35,000 category types. Next slide, please. So the current UK Part 66 licenses as of November 2021, and Cat A licenses 6175, non-UK 2052, Cat B1 5413, non-UK is 2200, and the Cat B2 2090, and non-UK 908. What that slide does not tell you is how many hold more than one license itself. So there may well be a significant reduction in the actual numbers of people as opposed to licenses held. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Kyriakos. So the UK-based profile on license holders, 66 license holders, as of November 2021, those are the age bands, and those are the number of UK-based 66 license holders. Now, it doesn't mean that they are active. It means that there's licenses that are recognized as still being current by the Civil Aviation Authority. And as we all know, the license is issued, but it's the companies that issue the approvals, the authorizations. So again, that's an area which we have to look into further to get a better idea of the demographics. Next slide, please. Next slide, Kyriakos.
Slide 21.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, there are 8,662 license holders in the UK whose licenses are current. 2,075 of those who are current are over 60, and indeed 2 are over the age of 100 years. Next slide, please. Next subject to be discussed is the actual situation during COVID-19, and we all appreciate that we're still in this particular stage. And it's said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. That is, for people involved with aviation, that is one of the saddest sights you could possibly see. And these sights were being repeated all around the world. Next slide, please. The airline industry statistics confirmed that 2020 was the worst year on record. 1.8 billion passengers flew in 2020, a decrease of 60.2% compared to the 4.5 billion who flew in 2019. Industry-wide air travel demand, that's measured in revenue per passenger kilometers, or RPK, dropped by 65.9% year on year. International passenger demand decreased by 75.6% compared to the year prior. Domestic air passenger dropped by 48.8%. Air connectivity declined by more than half in 2020, with the number of routes connecting airports falling dramatically at the outset of the crisis and was down more than 60% year on year in April 2020. The total industry revenue fell by 69% to 189 billion in 2020, and net losses were $126.4 billion in total. The decline in air passengers transported in 2020 was the largest recorded since global RPKs started being tracked in 1950. Next slide, please. Air freight was the bright spot in the air transport for 2020 as the market adapted to keep goods moving, including vaccines, personal protective equipment, and vital medical supplies, despite the massive drop in capacity from the bellies of passenger aircraft. Industry-wide available cargo tons fell by 21.4% year on year in 2020. This led to a capacity crunch within the industry, with a wide cargo load factor up 7.0% points to 53.8%, and this is the highest value in the IATA series started in 1990. At the end of the year, industry-wide cargo ton kilometers had returned close to pre-crisis values. However, the yearly decline in cargo demand was still the largest since the global financial crisis in 2009, at a sizable 9.7% year on year in 2020. Next slide, please. During COVID-19, it's probably a good idea just to get an idea of the timelines that actually happened in 2020. January 29th was the first positive case in the UK. 31st of January, Brexit. 31st of December, the UK left EASA. Many foreign workers left the UK, thus adding to staff skill shortages. In January 31st, the US suspended entry by any foreign nationals. And on March 23rd, the UK went into lockdown, closely followed by the airline industry, including MRO, going to suspended animation. Airline operations were severely curtailed, and planned MRO inputs were cancelled at short notice as operators took stock. Next slide, please. Continuing during COVID-19, training requirements were reviewed by MRO. In many cases, training was either cancelled or deferred. The amount of CBT training increased significantly, including aircraft type training. Talking to contacts within industry, we've even heard of instances where people were doing type CBT training whilst working on aircraft. And in some cases, they were doing CBT training working on aircraft, which wasn't even the type that they were being trained on. Investment in equipment and technology was cancelled or deferred. Heavy maintenance programs were reviewed, deferred based on reduced utilization. There was uncertainty as to how long aircraft were to remain in storage, which created a potential for incorrect aircraft maintenance manual storage conditions being used. And of course, the UK climate conditions are not ideal for extended periods of aircraft storage. And I suspect many of us involved with the MRO industry will know of aircraft that are at certain locations around the UK that have suffered as a result of this. Many MROs suffered by focusing on care and maintenance. Sorry, I'll start again. Many MROs survived by focusing on care and maintenance, end of lease and parting out. Company and regulatory authorities' boots on the ground audits were deferred and replaced with web-based audits. Regulatory authorities expressed concerns over staff well-being and their currency to carry out the tasks which they were authorized to do. Next slide, please. MRO commercial departments worked extremely hard to obtain limited availability work with reduced revenue. It became a bit of a Dutch auction. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, there was a reduced number of MRO inputs from offshore. It was difficult to plan maintenance input slots due to industry uncertainty, and hence it was problematic to resource plan, which in turn impacted on cost control. Staff left the industry due to job security uncertainty, companies reducing staff, or indeed companies ceasing trading. In March 2021, Travel Weekly reported that 26,000 UK aviation jobs had been lost since the start of the pandemic. Mental well-being was becoming more of a reality. Family bereavement through COVID-19, strained relationships, job insecurity, working from home, ability to cope mentally and financially were all contributory factors to an increase in the focus on mental well-being. Next slide, please. As you can see, there are a rather lot of factors that are affecting COVID and the situation we are in at this time. The potential impact to the MRO productivity due to the positive COVID-19 cases and a lack of clear government guidelines. Many companies define their own policies due to lack of government guidelines. Activity levels in MRO were of reduced intensity, i.e. reduced heavy maintenance. Operations merged or consolidated their positions. Operators diversified, for example, passenger airlines operated cargo. And I ask a question of the industry: how many MRO took the opportunity to review their structure and strategy and prepare for the new normal? Worldwide, in 2020, 45 airlines failed. MRO cost-cutting exercises were implemented. Staff were furloughed, and there was uncertainty as to how long this would be for. IR35 was introduced. Many who lost their jobs, formed their own companies, are now required to comply with this ruling. Next slide, please. Aircraft were retired earlier than planned. For example, the 747 fleet operated by BA. Due to the availability of new aircraft and good terms, operators took the opportunity to replace existing fleets. Aircraft affected by the above were sold on, often replacing older fleets, thus creating issues with operating higher technology aircraft by operators not experienced in doing so. The cargo conversion market gained momentum. An upsurge in the cargo market, plus the retirement of the 757 and 767 and increased popularity of the 737 NG conversion, has fueled this activity. The aircraft teardown sector of the industry was kept busy. And there were also issues raised over the Boeing 787 build quality. Airliner retirements. In August 2020, there were 6,239 commercial aircraft in storage. That's 25% of the world fleet. Worldwide, compared to 2,167 prior to the start of the pandemic. The number of aircraft in storage started to reduce in February 2021. 676 aircraft were retired in 2020, as opposed to 680 in 2019. By mid-August 2021, 276 aircraft had been retired. The market for parting out aircraft is expected to grow to $7.9 billion by this year. It is estimated that 12,000 aircraft will be retired over the next 20 years. Next slide, please. We have got a time lag, don't we, Kyriakos, unfortunately. Thank you. Airbus and Boeing backlogs as of 30th of June last year. Boeing had 5,084 aircraft, 4,106 or 81% are narrow body, and Airbus had 6,925 aircraft, 6,150 or 89% are narrow body. Next slide, please. So, to the new normal, where we're going to be going. Next slide, please. COVID-19 is undoubtedly the major contributory factor to the bigger picture. UK-wide passenger numbers could return to 2019 levels by 2025. High tech, low maintenance, younger fleets will reduce base maintenance input frequency, man hours, and indeed MRO profit. Heavy, super aircraft types such as the A380 have now ceased production. The last aircraft was delivered only recently to the Middle East, as will the 747 in 2022. Operators are now taking the 777X, the 787, and the 350 as options for their wide-body fleets. MRO should consider diversification to cater for more areas of the market. That's commercial, cargo, business, military cargo conversions. Adaptability in an evolving environment is the key to survival. An encouraging sign was the MRO in Amsterdam last year, where we used to get photographs of elderly or middle-aged gentlemen all standing there having a jolly good time. It's very encouraging to see that there are a number of younger folk being involved of mixed gender, as is also very, very important as well moving forward. So there are positive signs. Next slide, please. Now, this is where I probably go a little bit off-piste and put my point of view forward, but humour a person who's been around for a few years, who can see for himself, but again, I express this as only my personal opinion. With the advancement of aircraft technology, we should look to a review of the training, qualifications, skill sets required to support the future development. And I would also question, are Part 66 B1 and B2 licenses relevant for future aircraft generation technicians? I would ask that we look at review of the Part 66 license is required to meet the future demands of the industry. Consideration should be combining B1 and B2 and training sufficient numbers of technicians in that particular field. Not all of the people in the industry have to be licensed. We should be looking at craft and technician apprenticeships. Hand skills have suffered as a result of increasing demand to hold a license as a minimum. I'm still questioning why organizations are training youngsters coming into the industry to CAT A level. Why don't we just go straight for B1, B2? Simply because if you do a CAT A license, you have to repeat the modules again in order to satisfy the requirements of a B1 or a B2 license. Once those people have got their licenses, their Part 66 licenses, and they've done a type course and they meet the requirements and they're issued a company authorization, you stand the risk of having a person who is suddenly thrust into the limelight with a license in their hand, the ink's still wet, say, go and fix that aeroplane. And by the way, don't look behind you because you're the person that's actually doing the certification. I'd like to consider what we used to have in many years ago was called a journeyman level, and you can call it what you like. But the fact is that time-served apprentices who have attained their Part 66 licenses, we should be looking to mentor them and have their responsibilities increased as their confidence and competency levels increase. This stepped climb approach would produce high-quality, well-rounded licensed technicians equipped to address the needs of the future within the industry. Next slide, please. We should be looking to establish structured, standardized training at all levels for all MRO activities. We focus on licensed technicians. We should be looking at offering training in all areas, materials, planning, and all the factors and all the departments that support and make a 145 organization work. We should review systems, processes that are already in place but are failing or underperforming. An example of this may be SMS. My question to you. The industry must be leaner, smarter, sharper, technology savvy, and should avoid reverting to the old normal. Why have multiple base and line operations at the same location, often supporting the same aircraft type, requiring the same certification, the same tooling, equipment, spares, and access to data? Some years ago, the larger airlines in the UK that served a seasonal operation to the Mediterranean got together and they identified the areas of the Mediterranean and indeed the Canary Islands. So they had the Canary Islands, Spain, mainland, Balearics, and the Greek islands. And they spent a summer season supporting each other at those locations, no matter what the color of the tail was. They came around the corner, and if there was a problem, an AOG situation, they helped that operation get back on its feet and get back home again. So my question is, why are we spending so much money having a line of line maintenance offices side by side at the same location, where in fact a more concerted approach would be more cost beneficial to the industry? Consider MRO companies providing a one-stop shop MRO environment for customers. Customers do prefer this approach when you're actually talking to them, but I understand that it's not always practical to do so. But again, a way of identifying who does what to make the cost more effective probably is a way to look at the MRO industry moving forward. Consider unified training organizations, including apprenticeships, Part 147, management, etc., meeting the training requirements of the MRO industry. We should be looking at moving away from tick-in-the-box training. For example, human fact training should not be a 1-hour CBT experience simply to obtain a course certificate. It's wrong, in my opinion. Human factors particularly should be classroom-based, where you have the interaction between the instructor and indeed the class of attendees. Next slide. The new normal. I looked at what this was because I've heard the word mentioned, new normal, on a number of occasions. A new normal is a state in which an economy, society, etc., settles following a crisis, when this differs from the situation that prevailed prior to the start of that crisis. Use of the phrase new normal in relation to COVID-19 pandemic has been increasingly used to refer to changes in human behavior. And the phrase was first used in 1918 by a gentleman called Henry A. Wise Wood, an American inventor and a member of the US Naval Consulting Board. Next slide, please. Wood was, of course, referring to the situation post-World War I, but the analogy is interesting. And where it mentioned war, I've actually inserted the word COVID-19. So to consider the problems before us, we must divide our epoch into 3 periods: that of COVID-19, that of transition, and that of the new normal, which undoubtedly supersedes the old. The question before us, therefore, are broadly 2. How should we pass from COVID-19 to the new normal with the least jar in the shortest time? In that respect, should the new normal be shaped different from the old? Next slide, please. Now we're doing Kyriakos. Very good, thank you. So how can we achieve the new normal? We should identify what UK MRO Limited wants to be. What market is it going to attract? Identify what is required to meet the strategic objectives, where the MRO should be located, their market focus and their size. It's a known fact that many airports of a significant size consider hangars to be a nuisance because it actually reduces the number of places they can build hotels, extend the ramp area, etc., etc. Consider amalgamation of MRO for base and line maintenance operations. This will reduce operator costs at airports where multiple line operations support similar aircraft types. Next slide. Before we achieve the new normal, we should be looking for a UK MRO industry transformation strategy. We should be looking as best as we possibly can, and I know this is a very difficult one, to identify how many people we need to support the industry at all levels for the next 10 years, at least get a strategy in place. We should start succession planning now. We don't cull the old for the sake of it, but where it will benefit the operation. There's a benefit in keeping more experienced people on board, providing they are of the right approach and are capable of mentoring and assisting the new generation in their development. The benefits of the new normal will be fractious if attempted by MRO in isolation, even with larger organizations. The worldwide industry for MRO is extremely competitive, and a number of MROs have actually looked at worldwide locations from a single company. And I will quote one as a particular example, Lufthansa Technik, where Lufthansa Technik have not only got a number of locations worldwide in key locations, but also they did a project some years ago called 6 into 1, where they didn't have 6 HR departments, 6 materials departments. They actually focused on one location supporting all. So they reduced their costs and increased their efficiency in that area. Consider as UK MRO Limited, at least for the transformation period, working together to move forward. We should be appointing leaders in the industry that share the vision, that can transfer the vision to their teams, train and mentor them to meet the demands of the new normal. And it is not the responsibility of the regulator to steer this, but they will play a major part in defining the new normal. Next slide, please. So factors affecting the new normal, it's not just COVID-19. In many cases, COVID-19 exposed the cracks that were there already. Because of COVID-19, we still have yet to actually assess and identify what the full impact of Brexit will be on our organizations. How long will it take for the industry to recover? We're not sure. Mental well-being is more than just a phrase. How does the industry plan to operate with COVID-19 now and subsequent viruses in the future? A topic of discussion at the moment. How will the industry address the training gap that started in 2019? Time taken to establish regulatory authority bilateral agreements. For example, the EASA UK CEA bilateral is not expected to be in place till at least Q4 of this year. Next slide, please. On the 4th of October 2021, IATA stated that the airline industry is now over the worst of COVID-19. The total industry losses are expected to fall to $11.6 billion in 2022. The total industry losses by the end of 2022 for the 3 years will be just over $200 billion, resulting from COVID-19. FligScan, as part of the carbon emissions impact on the environment, will regain momentum and influence the industry. Airlines are already purchasing carbon offsets at considerable cost, and there's been a notable increase in rail passengers in some European countries. Next slide, please. Factors affecting the new normal. Increased risk of cyber attacks as more MRO systems become digitized. Terrorist activist threat and geopolitical influences in an ever-changing world. Operators deferring heavy maintenance will create a backlog and a potential maintenance tidal wave as a result of COVID. Early fleet retirements equals new aircraft delivery equals less MRO involvement. Sales of older aircraft in the past have been lower tech aircraft, such as the 737 Classic. Future sales will be of higher tech, where new skills and additional skill sets will be required. Organizations to review the number of authorizations held by individuals and look to restrict authorizations to held to OEM type or scope of activities per type. By this, what I mean is that I do get a little bit concerned when a person tells me they've got approvals on 15 aeroplanes and it's multiple OEMs. I ask the question, if we can restrict pilots to operate singly Airbus or Boeing aircraft, what is the reason we can't do this? The similar sort of thing for our licensed technicians. Next slide, please. Positive steps have been taken in the right direction and continue to do so. Examples of the CEA A31 group, that's the Part 147 working group. Reputable, well-managed training organizations are in place. IASTI, the International Air and Space Training Institute, has commenced operations and will offer training in a large number of disciplines relevant to the airline industry. The UK CEA CAP 1814 guidance accreditation of apprenticeships in England and Scotland was issued last year. The UK CEA training symposiums are held on a regular basis. EAMTC it's actually reduced benefit from the UK due Brexit, but there is no UK equivalent at this time. STEM learning is also having an impact in schools, colleges of a positive nature, and there's some fantastic work being done in that area. And also the CEA Human Factors Action Plan 2022-2024 was issued in November 2021, focusing on human factors and human performance, HP, detailed in the CEA strategy for human factors in civil aviation. So there are positives that are coming out of this. Next slide, please. So after we achieve the new normal, the question is to be asked, when can we expect to achieve the new normal? When will the industry crystal ball become clearer? What is being done by UK MRO Limited to address the new normal? Constant improvement process as part of UK MRO Limited is required, and should be a focus on retaining staff within the organisation and preventing a brain drain, as happened to the Middle East in the 80s and 90s, although that seems to have stemmed somewhat. But also the MRO UK Limited need to be major players in the world MRO Limited. Next slide. The impact of the new normal. The results of the impact will start to be seen in 2025. What could the impact be? A heavier dependence on technology, maintenance management systems, shop floor data capture, etc., etc. Fewer, larger, leaner, smarter, high-tech operations in locations best served to support their customers. Higher skill sets resulting from relevant, structured, standardized training at all levels in the MRO. MRO market diversity, freighter conversions, commercial business activity in the same MRO. Boeing at Gatwick are now looking at starting 737-800 cargo conversions. STS Aviation Services in Birmingham are heavily involved with the E7 program, which is the AWACS replacement for the Royal Air Force. Next slide, please. MRO forecast for 2021 to 2031. For MRO companies, a smaller fleet translates into less work. Demand is expected to be 33% or 60 billion below combined pre-COVID projections for 2020 and 2021. While the market is beginning to recover, the long-term MRO growth trend is now roughly half of pre-COVID expectations. Cumulatively, MRO demand is expected to be 95 billion lower over the forecast period. Next slide, please. And that's the MRO forecast by aircraft class, 2019 to 2031. And that gives you the indication of the various types of aircraft that are involved. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Kyriakos.
Slide 50.
Thank you very much, sir. The travel and the COVID-19. At the IATA AGM in Boston, Massachusetts on the 4th of October in 2021, Willie Walsh, the IATA Director General, said, "We are past the deepest point of the crisis. While serious issues remain, the path to recovery is coming into view." Walsh called for harmonization for travel restrictions. Given the improved data, knowledge, vaccines and testing, he said, the idea that the measures we put in place in February 2020, are relevant today is nonsense. Next slide, please. Slide just indicating the future of our industry. This is the near future of our industry, the aircraft types that we're likely to be operating within our fleets. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you very much.
53, but it takes a while, unfortunately.
No problem. Thank you for your patience. I do appreciate it.
No worries.
Okay. Only 101 years have actually taken place between these two major milestones. In 1919, a Vickers Vimy flew by Alcock and Brown flew from Canada to Ireland, a distance in 3,040 kilometers. It took them 15 hours and 57 minutes. And in 2020, an A350 operated by Singapore Airlines flew from Singapore to New York JFK, a distance of 15,349 kilometers, and it took them 18 hours and 40 minutes. That's how far we've come in 100 years. Next slide, please. But how long will it be until we see these? These are the aircraft that are on the drawing boards now. So I would suggest that what we're looking for is not looking for the aircraft that are immediate, our near future. We should be looking at how we're going to address these in the future and how prepared we can make our industry. Next slide, please. Bit of a flippant phrase, and I do apologize for that. The chips are down, but the industry, the aviation industry, is extremely resilient. It has proven to be as such time and time again. Apart from the Second World War, the aviation industry has faced more combined challenges in the past 2 years since commercial aviation commenced operations over 100 years ago. There is potential for the aviation industry to become leaner, stronger, more cost-effective and efficient as a result of the setbacks of the past 2 years. But in order to do this, we must embrace change together and define its future. Next slide, please, Kyriakos. I've come to the end of my presentation, and I'd like to thank Kyriakos for his patience. I'd like to thank the audience for their patience, and I'd like to hand back to Kyriakos now, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you again, Mike. That was very informative. Unfortunately, the technology didn't help us too much. I would say the opposite. There was a delay because this is a live event, and I think Teams is creating this lag as a live event. So again,
you did extremely well, sir. Thank you.
Well. Deep apologies. There is at least 5 seconds on average between changing a slide and appearing on the other side's monitor. So as I said, it was very interesting, and I would like to welcome the attendees for any questions they may have. We are a bit off time, but feel free to write your questions on the chat box. All right, so I don't see any question. Okay, so there is one question. So how aware do you think the MROs are of the findings and implications you have covered in your presentation? Are they discussing them internally within an MOR and within an MRO and between MROs?
Good question. As regards market intelligence and also the bigger picture as to the way in which we should be looking at this moving forward, it varies considerably, Kyriakos. Some are very, very astute, very switched on, and they're actually addressing it. But I also suspect that with some at the end of this pandemic, or when it becomes a little bit more stable, there's a risk for them to actually revert back to type, which is something we must not do. We should, in my opinion, we should be taking this as an opportunity to move forward. But the only way we can do this is by having a unified approach. And as I said, talk to each other, find out what's going on, find out what the market trends are, and find out what you're doing. As I mentioned during my presentation, probably one of the most interesting points that came across to me was the demographics for licensed engineers. It's quite worrying. So that can't be done in isolation. That is a fairly large project which needs to be addressed by industry as itself. And as I say, there are a number of brilliant initiatives, but individually by individual organizations, I believe we do need to sit down and work out what our strategy is for the future. And it's not just training apprentices, it's a much bigger picture. We don't have the ability to compete on a world market such as I said, Lufthansa Technics do, because they've got the network in place already. The key to their success is location, but also it's a unified approach. We don't have that at the moment.
Okay, so there's another question over here. Does the government, Department of Transport, understand the problems, in your opinion? Because authorities seem to be responding.
Yeah, what appears to be happening, I thought about this, is that we're looking at pitching at too high level. We're looking at business, looking at industry, but we actually be looking at the foundations in which we build the industry. And the basic elements for building the industry are having a structure in place, to having the correct people in place, to having the ability to develop and grow. And at this moment in time, it does appear to be that is indeed not the case. So the question about whether the DFT is actually aware of it, I would hope they are, but I'm afraid I'm not aware of the answer to that question.
Okay, so and an important comment and question. So the UK CAA data does not give gender breakdowns regarding maintenance licenses. Do you have any idea of the numbers, percentages of females working in MRO? How important is it to attract women into MRO, and how do you think this can be achieved?
Good question. I don't have the breakdowns. I wish I did. But from my experience is that there are more females within the industry now than there were a number, say about 10 years ago, but it's still significantly below the level in which which I would like to see a gender balance created. And that's something we have to work on. And it's how we attract people to the industry, how we attract youngsters to the industry. Very important, very important. And I've met some fantastic licensed engineers that are female, no question. The capabilities, I would stand them up against anybody. And something which unfortunately engineering maintenance is seen by many as being a male domain, and that's how we crack that nut. But I know that there are a lot of conversations taking place in industry, a lot of people that are much switched on to this subject than I am, that are looking at that and looking to address it. As I said, STEM is a classic example where people are going out into industry, going out into the colleges and the schools. There's initiatives starting where they're looking at attracting young people, attracting people to the industry. But when you look at the pictures, there aren't that many females in those photographs where you've got the class of. Majority of them are actually still male.
Yeah, so another question over here regarding technology. So you showed some radical new aircraft configurations for future designs. What should MROs be anticipating from OEMs in terms of changes to how aircraft are designed for maintenance?
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, we're looking, the aircraft types that I showed us is the 737 MAX, the 777X, the 787-350. They're going to be the stable diet of MROs for the next 20 years plus, aren't they? What we have to do is to look past that. Look past that and look where we're going to be going to meet that. So there should be not only is discussing what we're looking at doing for the next number of years, but also where the next generation after that as well. Very important. But at this particular moment in time, unfortunately, the future isn't clear enough to even decide what's going to be happening in 6 months' time. If you're looking at MROs, for argument's sake, if I was talking to a commercial department in an MRO, they would have their order books full for this winter. They would also be planning for next winter's inputs. They would be signing contracts with airlines, operators that would be running a number of years, not just a single year. That is an operation, that's the side of the operation which does not really exist in any great depth at this time because of the uncertainty.
Okay, so another question regarding competency. You started by describing the lack of the right numbers and competency of licensed engineers in UK MRO pre-COVID. Is your conclusion that this is still a problem in the new normal, or do we have now too many?
Good question. Again, the competency level is something which wasn't really assessed to any great degree until quite in a number of years that they've just gone by. So we are now looking at competency levels at a higher degree. So to say that the skill set wasn't there beforehand and it is, or it was there and it isn't there now, would be difficult to define. However, because of the way in which training was reviewed, curtailed, reduced for various reasons, if you ask me the question straight, I would say that I believe the competency level of a licensed engineer overall in the newer generation, there'll probably be more grounding in a person who did his apprenticeship, say 20 years ago, or their apprenticeship 20 years ago, than a person did it about 10 years ago. So the answer is yes.
Okay, an interesting question regarding licenses. You mentioned that about the merging of B1 and B2 engineers licenses. Would this be due to the much more / higher integration of avionics into structures like the 787 and the A350?
Yes, a number of national awareness authorities have already done this. There was one for the older members of the audience, they can remember that when they went on shift, there was a radio man, there was a radar man, or I use the word a radar person, a radio person. Avionics, even down to the stages of being airframe and engine specific when you went into the hangars. It's the way in which the culture was then. If we instill that culture at a younger age, you can produce the B1s and B2s. There are more engineers now, licensed technicians, that are actually converting and having both licenses on their ticket. But what I would also say is that we have to be very careful about where we draw the line. This is what I'm talking about, the restriction of approvals and certification. There are certain tasks that are very, very specifically highly skilled for avionics tasks, such as major wiring mods, that you really have to know what you're doing. So we would have to look at the way in which we allocate tasks and indeed look at the scope of licenses. But I'm just saying that perhaps it's time for a review as to how we do it at the moment.
Yes, and what opportunities do you see for the MRO community to diversify into advanced air mobility, for example, retrofitting for hybrid electric, eVTOL, drones, prior to the introduction of hydrogen-powered large passenger aircraft?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is a diversification I was meaning exactly. There are a number of MROs that specifically focus on a market, and in order to move forward, you have to be flexible in your approach. But the level of flexibility obviously depends on capabilities, but there's no reason at all why people shouldn't be looking at drone maintenance and such like as part of their scope. Indeed, a number of operators are now looking at being approved on a military aspect. So they've got the MAA 145 approval as not only just the EASA, FAA or CAA, they're looking at the MAA. There's no reason at all why they can't be looking at this within reason.
And with respect to the development of an MRO transformation strategy, who do you think should take the leadership? For example, ADS published the last one in 2010.
Yes, this is going to be the one we're going to have to crack. How do we get everybody around the table to discuss this, and who will take the lead? That's a very good question, and unfortunately, it's going to have to come from industry, and it will have to take just an organization or a group of people to take the initiative to get everybody on a table to see whether they can actually discuss. Did this recently in the Middle East, again looking at mutual support at locations where the operators served, and we got all the major operators, bar, I think it was bar 2, around the table, and we actually started to discuss. So that start the ball rolling, put the feelers out, see what people feel, see how they react to this. It would be an interesting experiment to do, but I do believe to move forward together in a position of strength is a much more constructive way of looking at the market going forward.
Okay, perhaps we can conclude the Q&A session. I have one question of my own here in terms of the impact of the pandemic on the heavy maintenance sector. From your experience, Mike, how have you seen, the maintenance personnel, especially the experienced technicians who are engaged in, structural repairs, structural inspections? Has this base of personnel have been eroded by the pandemic? Do we lack, or do you see, the need for a new generation of experienced technicians that can tackle, new problems on old aircraft, for example?
The number of people who have left the industry because of the uncertainty has been quite noticeable. People were looking at early retirements. There's also some people have taken that as well. Because we haven't invested as an industry in replacing in sufficient numbers and indeed in sufficient levels of capability and competence. If you're asking me the question, is there an issue with skills? I would say yes. Attracting the right people with the correct qualifications, yes, I believe there's also a case to look at that as well. It isn't necessarily numbers, Kyriakos. Initially, you're looking at the capability and competence of the people that you've already got, because when you take a person for an apprenticeship, for argument's sake, and they start at an age of about 17 years of age, it's recognized in the industry that when they tend to get their qualifications, their licenses, normally in their early 20s, it then takes them a further period of time to actually be competent and capable to exercise the rights of that fully and fully understand what they're actually doing. So there is a build up. And if people ask me, I will say to them, it normally takes about 10 years to produce a person of the capability that you're looking for to move forward. So that's the vacuum that's being created, and that's our challenge to see how we can fill that.
Certainly. So thank you very much for an excellent presentation, and it was very informative and very insightful and very sincere, I would say. And on this opportunity, I would like also to encourage all attendees to stay informed and get in touch with our specialist group. Here you see the web page, our email, and we also have a LinkedIn group where you can be part of. Again, thank you again for attending. Those members of the society who wish to obtain a certificate of attendance for CPD purposes, for example, they can contact us at the airworthiness@aerosociety.com email by indicating their grade membership and their ID number. So thank you again, and Mike, it was very nice having you deliver this talk, and stay safe.
Thank you, Kyriakos.
Yeah, thanks all. Bye.